She was born in a place where people talked more than they listened and judged more than they helped. Life there moved slowly, but the weight on her heart was always heavy. From a young age, she learned that being quiet was safer than being honest. And being invisible was better than being noticed. Her family struggled every day, not only with money, but with hope. Some mornings she woke up already tired because she knew what waited for her outside the door. The town was small, and everyone knew. Everyone, or at least they believed they did. Stories traveled faster than truth, and once a story attached itself to a person, it never left. She was still very young when whispers started about her family, and later about her. She did nothing wrong. Yet people looked at her like she carried something bad inside. She learned to keep her eyes down and her words. Short school was not a place of comfort. Teachers saw her as slow because she did not speak much. Other children learned early that she was an easy target. They laughed at her clothes and her silence. She wanted to disappear many times, but she stayed because she believed that leaving would prove them right. Each day she promised herself that she would survive just one more day out. Home things were not much easier. The walls were thin, and so was the patience of the adults around her. They loved her in their own broken way, but love mixed with stress often came out as anger. She learned to cook early and clean without being asked. She tried to become useful, hoping usefulness would earn kindness. Sometimes it did, and sometimes it did not. She grew older. The town seemed to shrink. The same roads, the same faces, the same judgments. She took small jobs wherever she could. Early mornings, late nights, tired hands. She worked harder than most, yet was paid less respect than anyone. People said she would never leave that place, and maybe she believed them for a while. There were moments when she dreamed quietly. She imagined a life where no one knew her past, where her name did not come with a story attached. The dreams felt dangerous, so she kept them hidden even from herself. She focused instead on surviving each day and helping her family when she could. Then something happened that changed how people spoke her name. A mistake that was not truly hers, yet the blame settled on her like dust that could not be wiped away. The town turned colder. Doors that were once open closed quickly. Faces that once ignored her now stared with sharp eyes. She felt shame pushed onto her shoulders by hands she could not see. From that moment, everything became harder. Finding work became a battle. Even simple kindness felt rare. She walked through the town, feeling like she was carrying a sign that everyone could read. Her heart grew heavy, and her smile disappeared. She stopped defending herself because no one was listening anyway. Still, she did not break. She woke up each day and did what needed to be done. She helped neighbors who would never help her back. She stayed honest in a place that rewarded lies. Some nights she cried quietly so no one would hear. Other nights she stared at the ceiling, wondering how long a person could endure before something inside finally gave way. The mountains above the town were the only place that brought her peace from below. They looked distant and calm, untouched by human cruelty. Whenever life felt unbearable, she would look toward them and imagine the silence there. She did not know why, but the thought of the mountains made her feel less alone. People warned her not to wander too close to the mountain paths. They said strange things about the land and about the man who lived high above. They spoke of wealth and isolation, of power and mysteries. Some said he was dangerous. Others said he was broken. She listened but did not care. Rumors had already taught her how little words meant. One evening after a long day of work, she took a path she had never taken before. The sun was low and the air was cool. She walked slowly, letting her thoughts settle. Her body was tired, but her mind felt lighter the farther she went from the town. She did not know that this walk would become the quiet beginning of a story no one in the town could imagine. At that moment, she was just a woman carrying years of hurt and strength she did not yet understand. She was not looking for rescue or love. She was only looking for a place where she could breathe. As she reached a clearing, she stopped. The silence was deep and steady, unlike anything she had known. It did not judge or question, it simply existed. She stood there for a long time, feeling something shift inside her for the first time in years. She felt seen without being watched. Turned back before it got too dark, unaware that eyes from far above had noticed her, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. Her life had been shaped by cruelty, but it had also shaped resilience, and though the world below had tried to break her, something greater was slowly moving toward her path. That night she returned home the same woman to everyone else, but inside something had changed. The weight was still there, but it felt different, lighter somehow, like the first crack in a wall that had held her in place for far too long. The mountain man lived high where the air was thin and the world below felt small. He had built his life far from the voices that judged and the eyes that watched. He was quiet and strong not because he wanted to be feared, but because he had learned to survive without needing anyone else. His wealth was simple in one sense, yet complicated in another. He owned land and resources that gave him power, but he used it only when it mattered to protect what he cared about. He noticed her the first time by accident. From a distance, she looked different from the others who passed through the edge of the forest. She did not carry herself with pride, nor did she shrink into fear. She simply moved through the world with a careful patience that made her hard to ignore. For days he watched quietly, not because he wanted to judge, because he wanted to understand. She never spoke to anyone while he watched. She helped an old woman carry a basket. She stopped to listen to a small child crying. She did not look for reward or recognition, yet kindness seemed to follow her unknowingly. Remembered a time in his own life when he had needed someone to stand with him when the world turned against him. He knew that the way to know a person was not through gossip or stories, but through quiet observation and through shared moments without words. Some people had the courage to show their true selves only when no one expected it, and she had that courage. One day she wandered further than usual. He decided to approach, not to scare her, but to see if she could trust someone. He stepped from the shadows slowly, and she froze, not because she was afraid, but because she did not expect a living being to appear without warning in that place. She looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide if he would hurt her or help her. He said nothing at first, only offered a small gesture of peace, an open hand and a calm expression. She studied him carefully, then nodded slightly, not speaking, but accepting that he meant no harm. They stayed there in silence for a long time, letting the quiet speak where words were unnecessary. Mountain Man learned quickly that she was unlike anyone he had ever met. She had a strength built from hardship, yet she carried it lightly. She had seen cruelty and survived without letting it consume her. She had learned to protect herself and the few she cared about, even when no one else believed in her worth. He began to show her small parts of the mountain she had never seen before, paths that led to streams hidden from view, places where wildflowers grew in secret meadows, where the sun felt warm even when the wind was cold. These were gifts without value in the eyes of the town, but priceless in the way they made her feel alive. She found herself returning to the mountain more often. She did not come expecting anything. She only came because being there reminded her that life could feel different than the one she knew below, that she could breathe without the weight of judgment pressing on her chest. The mountain did not ask for her past. It only allowed her to exist as she was. They began to talk quietly as days passed, not with words at first, but with small gestures. A shared laugh, a look, held a moment of understanding when no one else could see. The man was patient, never rushing her, never asking her to explain what the town had done to her. He only let her be and let her learn that trust was possible. She told him very little at first. She had learned that words could hurt and silence could protect, but slowly she began to share small pieces of herself, stories of work and struggle, of moments when she wanted to leave and moments when she stayed. She spoke in ways that were honest, yet careful, and he listened without interrupting, never pushing, never judging. Shared pieces of his life as well, not to impress or intimidate, but to show that vulnerability was not weakness even. He had known loss and disappointment, and he had learned that isolation did not always bring peace. Sometimes it only made the world feel lonelier, till someone showed up to care quietly and without condition. Their bond grew not from grand gestures or dramatic events, but from the steady rhythm of being present for one another in the mountain air. They found a balance that neither of them had known was possible. They learned that understanding could exist without words, and that care could exist without expectation. The town below continued its usual patterns of gossip and judgment, yet she no longer carried its weight alone. The mountain man never judged her for what she had endured. He never asked her to prove her worth. He simply treated her as someone who mattered, as someone whose life had value regardless of the stories whispered behind Her back she began to smile more often, even when no one in the town noticed she laughed quietly. When he showed her a hidden trail or when a fox darted across the path, she felt lighter because someone believed in her, not because she had earned it, but because they simply saw her as she was. The mountain man saw the quiet strength that she carried. She had survived the cruelty of a small town and had not let it define her. She had endured more than most people could imagine. Yet she still found ways to care for others, to be kind when it was easier to be bitter. Her resilience inspired him. As much as his presence inspired Harentime, the mountain became their shared world, a place where she could be free, and where he could show that even wealth and power could be gentle. When guided by respect and understanding, they did not need to speak of love in words, because their actions and presence carried the meaning more clearly than any sentence could say. Began to believe that life could hold kindness and safety, even in a world that had offered her so little. She started to see herself as someone who deserved care and protection. She had learned the lesson of the mountains slowly and carefully, that trust was possible and that someone could stand beside her without trying to change or control her. The bond they formed became a shield against the town that had tried to define her worth. She was no longer alone in her pain or in her hope. The mountain man was not a savior in the dramatic sense, but in the quiet and steady ways that mattered most. He provided a space where she could grow without fear. They spent days exploring the quiet corners of the mountain, finding places untouched by human eyes. Sometimes they sat together in silence. Sometimes they shared small stories and thoughts. They laughed quietly at small things and marveled at the beauty of simple moments. Each day strengthened the connection that had begun as a chance encounter and had grown into something neither of them had expected. She learned to let go of some of the fear she carried from the town. She learned that being kind did not make her weak, that showing herself to someone could bring safety instead of harm, that life could be more than survival and shame. She felt a sense of possibility that had been missing for years. The mountain man continued to watch and protect without interference. He understood that the world below was harsh, and that the town might never accept her or their connection. But he did not need anyone else's approval. He needed only to stand beside her and let her see that someone believed in her quietly and without condition. Days passed, and their friendship deepened into something unspoken yet powerful. They did not need dramatic declarations or public gestures, because their shared trust and respect carried a weight far greater than words could express. They had discovered a bond that was rare and resilient, a quiet refuge from a world that had often been cruel. The woman began to walk with more confidence. Even when she returned to the town, she did not seek revenge or recognition. She simply carried herself differently, because she had learned that her worth was not defined by the whispers or the glances of others. She had someone who saw her, and that made all the difference. And the mountain man continued to show that care could be silent and steadfast. He did not need to change her story or erase her past. He only needed to stand beside her and let her feel that someone could see her strength in her heart and honor both. Without question, when the town learned that she was spending time with the man from the mountains, the gossip grew louder. People whispered about her everywhere she went. They said she was trying to take advantage of him, or that she would ruin him. They tried to warn him that she was not worthy and that he would regret trusting her. He heard the words but did not respond. He had seen too much in life to let strangers decide who deserved care or respect. She felt the pressure to every glance from neighbors and coworkers reminded her that she was being judged. People she had grown up with looked at her with suspicion or pity. She felt the familiar weight on her shoulders, yet she no longer carried it alone. She had someone who believed in her without conditions, and that gave her a quiet strength. The man invited her to see more of the mountain as a way to escape the constant eyes and ears of the town. They walked through trails that curved around cliffs and through forests so dense that sunlight barely touched the ground. She began to feel a freedom she had never known in her life. There was no gossip here, no judgment, only the quiet hum of nature and the steady presence of someone who cared for her. They shared small moments that mattered more than grand gestures. Sometimes they would find a stream and sit for hours watching the water move around stones. She learned to enjoy silence without feeling lonely. She learned that conversation did not always need to fill the space between people, that sometimes being present was enough to show trust and understanding despite the beauty and peace of the mountains. She knew that the world below had not changed. People still judged and whispered she felt the sting of the past still trying to claim her. She worried that the bond she was forming could be destroyed by voices that had never understood her. The man sensed her worry. He spoke quietly about the importance of standing together even when others tried to pull you apart. He did not promise that the world would change, but he showed her that their small corner of the world could be a place of safety. He reminded her that her worth was not tied to public opinion and that she did not need validation from those who could not see her heart. One day a group from the town came near the edge of the mountain. They were looking for her, or maybe just curious about the rumors. They shouted questions and warnings, but she did not respond. She stayed close to the man and followed his lead. She realized that she could face others without fear because she was not alone anymore. The presence of the town reminded her how strong she had become, how she could move through spaces where others tried to define her and still maintain her dignity. The man had given her a model for quiet courage. He showed her that strength was not loud or confrontational, but steady and reliable. She began to share more of herself with him, stories she had never told anyone else's, tales of work and struggle, moments of loneliness and small victories. She spoke without fear of judgment because he listened and believed in the truth of her life. He never interrupted or minimized her experiences. He only offered understanding. In respecting return, he shared pieces of his life to moments of loss, moments of feeling misunderstood or alone. He told her of mistakes he had made and of people who had tried to take advantage of him. He showed her that even those who seemed strong could be vulnerable, and that strength was found in how one faced that vulnerability, not in pretending it did not exist. Together, they built a quiet world where honesty and care were the foundation. They explored hidden valleys and secret meadows and spent long afternoons watching the changing light across the mountains. Sometimes they laughed quietly when a fox or bird interrupted their walk. Sometimes they sat without speaking, letting the wind and trees carry their thoughts. Her confidence grew with each passing day. She realized that she could live without the constant fear of judgment. She learned that standing beside someone who truly saw her could transform how she felt about herself. She began to recognize her own resilience and the quiet power she had carried all along. The town continued its gossip and attempts to shame her, but she faced it differently. Now she no longer ran. She no longer lowered her eyes. She walked with a sense of calm because she knew her truth and had someone to share it with. Someone who would stand quietly beside her, no matter what the world said. The man watched her grow with pride. He had chosen to respect her and give her space to be herself without interference. He had chosen to show that care and trust could be stronger than fear and judgment. He saw her resilience as a reflection of the strength that existed in both of them when they were together. Sometimes they discussed what life might be like if they returned to the town fully together. She worried about the whispers, the pity, and the constant need to defend herself. He reassured her that they could face it slowly and carefully, or choose to stay in the mountain where they were free from the constant eyes of others. Her days became filled with a mix of cautious joy and careful hope. She learned to laugh again, even when the world below was harsh. She learned to trust small gestures and quiet moments, and to see value in herself beyond what anyone else said. She began to understand that freedom was not only physical but emotional, and that the mountain had given her a space to discover that the bond between them deepened. Through shared experiences of simple life lessons, they helped each other in small ways, guiding each other along paths that were difficult, both physically and emotionally. They did not need drama or spectacle to define their relationship. Their connection was strong because it was based on understanding and mutual respect. She realized that she had begun to reclaim the parts of herself that the town had tried to bury. Her voice became stronger, her heart felt lighter. She no longer needed to prove anything to anyone because she had someone who saw her and believed in her worth. She started to dream quietly about a future where she could continue to grow and live without fear. The man continued to show that trust was a living thing. It required patience, care, and attention. He had chosen to fight for her in the quiet ways that mattered most, not by confronting the world directly, but by giving her the space and courage to face it with him by her side. He showed her that standing together could create a refuge, even when everything around them was harsh. One evening, they watched the sun set from a high ridge. the colors spread across the sky, painting the mountain with warmth and beauty. She realized how far she had come from the girl who had walked through the town feeling invisible and judged. She had found a place where she could breathe, a person who could see her, and a sense of strength. She had never known, though the town below continued to whisper and judge, she no longer carried it alone. The man had not only given her a companion, but had shown her that loyalty and respect were more powerful than cruelty and rumor. She began to feel that she could face whatever came from below and continue to grow in the life she had begun to build on the mountain. Their time together was not about grand declarations or dramatic rescue, but about the quiet work of trust, patience, and presence. They discovered that love and care were most powerful when shown consistently and without conditions. She began to understand that her past did not define her, and that she could choose the life she wanted, even in the face of a world that tried to break her. The whispers from the town grew louder and more aggressive. They tried to spread lies about her, and the mountain man people claimed she was unworthy, that she would bring trouble, and that he should leave her behind. Their words were meant to frighten, to isolate, and to remind her of the past. She felt the familiar tension in her chest, yet she no longer felt powerless. The mountain man stood by her side quietly and firmly. He did not respond with anger or confrontation, but with presence and strength. His patience became a shield for her against the voices that tried to tear her down. He showed her that loyalty and steadfast care could be stronger than the harshest words. They began to encounter others who tried to interfere. People from the town came to the edge of the mountain paths, demanding she return or warning him of consequences. They shouted insults and tried to scare them away. She no longer flinched. Instead, she stayed close to the man who had shown her that she did not need to face the world alone. The man spoke quietly to her during those moments, reminding her that the world could try to break them, but it could not control what they chose to believe about themselves. He encouraged her to hold on to her truth and to recognize her own strength. She realized that their bond was becoming a fortress against the cruelty that had followed her for years. They spent long days exploring deeper parts of the mountain. She learned to trust her instincts and to rely on the quiet guidance he offered. She discovered hidden streams high in the ridges and meadows that seemed untouched by human hands. The mountain became not just a place of refuge, but a space where she could reclaim the parts of herself the town had tried to erase in those moments. She learned patience, patience with herself and with the world, patience with trust and with hope. She realized that healing was not a moment but a process, and that having someone beside her made the journey possible. She began to feel lighter and more capable, even when confronted with fear and doubt. The mountain man did not ask her to prove her worth or defend herself. He simply treated her with the respect and care she had always deserved. His actions were consistent, quiet, and deliberate, showing her that trust could be real and that love could exist without judgment. She began to internalize that strength and to see herself through his steady eyes. One day they found an ancient grove hidden among the rocks. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting patterns on the ground. She felt a sense of peace she had not known. In years here there was no past, no town, no judgment, only the present and the quiet understanding between them. She realized that she could exist fully without fear. The town did not stop trying to interfere, but their attempts began to lose power over her. She no longer reacted with fear or shame. Instead, she responded with calm and quiet determination. She walked with her head held high even when others stared or whispered. Their words became small and powerless compared to the presence she shared with the mountain man. She began to see the mountain as a teacher, showing her that life could be guided by strength, patience, and care rather than cruelty. She learned that standing with someone who believed in her could transform how she felt about herself and the world around her. She began to feel a sense of hope that had been absent for far too long. The man continued to show that protection could be gentle yet unwavering. He did not need to control her or dictate her actions. He only needed to be present, to offer support, and to share the quiet strength that came from understanding and care. She felt safe enough to explore not just the mountain, but the parts of herself that had been hidden. As their days together grew longer, she began to trust herself more. She spoke up when she had something to say. She acted on her own decisions. and she no longer felt that every choice would bring harm. She began to reclaim the autonomy that the town had tried to take from her, and the courage that had been buried under years of judgment. The town below continued to spread rumors and create obstacles. Yet she faced it with a new sense of resilience. She did not need to prove herself to them because she had someone who truly understood her. She began to recognize that her life could be defined by her own choices and the people she chose to trust rather than the voices that had once dictated her worth. The mountain became a place of quiet victories. Small accomplishments became meaningful. She learned to hike paths that had seemed impossible. She learned to navigate the streams and forests with confidence. She learned that she could be independent and strong and still accept help when it was offered freely. She discovered that strength did not mean doing everything alone. In moments of quiet reflection, she thought about the life she had endured. The judgment, the gossip, and the attempts to break her had shaped her, yet they had not defeated her. She had survived, and now she was learning to thrive. She understood that her resilience was not only about endurance, but about the courage to continue believing in goodness and care, even when the world tried to convince her otherwise. The bond with the mountain man deepened. They did not need grand statements or dramatic moments to affirm what they felt. They found meaning in the small gestures, in the presence, and in the consistent care that was shown every day. She realized that real support was not loud or flashy, but steady and reliable, and that it could transform a life over time. She began to dream again quietly about a life where she could continue to grow. She thought about a future where she could navigate the town or choose to stay in the mountain. She felt that she could face any challenge because she had learned to trust herself, and because she had someone who would always stand by her side. She understood that together they could withstand judgment and cruelty even when faced with attempts to shame and belittle her. She responded with calm and dignity. She no longer allowed the opinions of others to control her life. She had found an inner strength that came from being seen, understood, and respected. She knew that the mountain and the man had given her more than safety. They had given her a mirror to see her own worth. They spent time helping each other with tasks small and large, clearing trails, gathering food, and preparing for the changing seasons. Each act was a lesson in cooperation, care, and shared responsibility. She learned that life was not about avoiding hardship, but about facing it with support and trust. She discovered that joy could exist alongside challenge, and that laughter could return even after years of sorrow. The woman reflected on her journey from the girl who had walked through the town burdened with shame and fear. She realized that the mountain had not only offered a refuge, but it helped her reclaim herself. Her resilience had been strengthened by the steady presence of someone who believed in her. She had learned that survival was not enough, and that she could thrive with courage, care, and companionship. The mountain man continued to stand by her, showing that commitment was expressed in everyday actions and not only in words. He taught her that facing the world did not require perfection or constant victory, but consistent courage and mutual respect. They had built a life that was small yet meaningful, a space where they could grow and heal together. She began to see that her past did not define her and that she could choose the life she wanted. She understood that the whispers, the judgment, and the attempts to break her had shaped her, but had not controlled her. She had someone who saw her strength and cared for her, and that was enough to stand against any challenge. As the sun set over the mountains, she felt a sense of calm. She knew that the town below could not touch the bond they had created. She had learned that true support did not need approval from others, and that love could exist quietly, patiently, and steadfastly. She realized that she had survived and was now beginning to live with freedom, dignity, and hope. The seasons changed on the mountain, and with each passing day she felt stronger. She had learned to trust herself and to believe in her own worth. The town below still whispered and watched, yet their words no longer held power over her. She moved with a quiet confidence built from years of struggle and the steady support of someone who had shown her care without conditions. The mountain man continued to stand by her side, offering strength and understanding. He never asked her to prove herself or explain her past. He simply shared presence and patience and showed her that loyalty and support could be a quiet but powerful force. She learned that being seen and valued could transform how she felt about herself and her life. They explored the mountain together, finding hidden valleys and secret groves. She learned to navigate the streams and climb paths that had once seemed impossible. The air was crisp and clean, and each day it's brought small victories. She discovered that life could be beautiful and that joy could return even after long years of hardship in the mountains. She found freedom from judgment and fear. She could laugh and speak without worrying about the opinions of others. She discovered that the past could remain part of her story without controlling her present or future. She felt a sense of peace she had never known, walking freely and living fully in each moment. Bond between them grew stronger through shared experiences and mutual care. They did not need grand declarations or dramatic gestures because their trust and respect for each other carried more weight than any words could. They learned that connection could be quiet and consistent, and that it could withstand outside pressure and judgments. She began to see her own strength reflected in the man who had stood beside her. She realized that she had endured and survived much more than she had ever given herself credit for. She had learned patience, courage, and resilience, and she had discovered that it was possible to love and be loved without fear or shame. Sometimes they would sit together watching the sunrise or set painting the mountain with colors that seemed almost unreal. She felt a sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the challenges that had shaped her, and for the presence of someone who had chosen to stand by her without condition. She understood that safety and trust could create a foundation for healing and growth. The town below continued to gossip, but she no longer felt threatened by it. She had learned that her life was hers to live, and that she did not need the approval of those who had once tried to define her worth. She walked through the paths of her life with calm confidence, knowing that she could face any challenge. With courage and support, she began to take more risks in exploring both the mountain and herself. She climbed higher cliffs and crossed streams that once seemed impossible. She spoke more openly and shared her thoughts and feelings without fear. She discovered that freedom was not just physical but emotional, and that the ability to trust and be trusted was the key to that freedom. Mountain Man continued to guide and support her, showing that care and respect could be powerful forces. In a world that often valued judgment over understanding, he showed her that standing together could create a safe space. Even when others tried to intrude or interfere, their life on the mountain became a testament to the strength of quiet loyalty and the power of consistent presence. She began to dream about the future, not with fear, but with hope. She imagined a life where she could continue to grow and thrive, where judgment did not dictate her choices, and where she could live with dignity. In freedom, she realized that her past had not defined her, and that she had the ability to shape her own story. The bond between them became a refuge that protected her from the cruelty she had endured for so long. They shared simple moments and small victories and found joy in the quiet aspects of life. They laughed together and worked together, and learned that trust and support could withstand any challenge. She learned that her strength did not come from avoiding hardship, but from facing it with courage and support. She understood that true resilience was not measured by endurance alone, but by the ability to continue believing in goodness and care even when the world tried to convince her otherwise. She had found a life where strength and kindness coexisted. In the evenings, they would sit together in quiet reflection. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the hardship, the judgment, the pain, and the slow transformation. She realized that she had reclaimed herself, and that she no longer carried the weight of other people's opinions. She had learned to value her own truth and to trust her own heart. Mountain Man showed her that love and care were most powerful when shown consistently and without conditions. He had never demanded anything from her. He had never asked her to prove herself. He had simply stood by her, allowing her to grow and discover her own strength. She realized that this was the truest form of support, and that it had changed her life completely. The days continued to pass with a sense of quiet fulfillment. They worked together on the land, gathering what they needed and exploring the untouched parts of the mountain. They found satisfaction in simple accomplishments and joy in each other's presence. They discovered that life could be meaningful and beautiful without drama or spectacle. And that peace could be found even in a world that had once seemed cruel. She began to understand that her life was no longer dictated by the whispers and judgment of others. She had discovered her own power and the importance of surrounding herself with people who valued her truth, she felt a sense of freedom that was deep and lasting, and she knew that she could face whatever challenges remained with courage, and Grace the Mountain became a symbol of resilience and renewal for her. She realized that she had not only survived the hardships of the past, but had built a life that reflected her strength and her choices. She had discovered that trust, care, and loyalty were more powerful than fear or cruelty, and that the bonds formed through these values could endure any test. She walked through the mountain paths with confidence and peace. She had learned that her worth was not defined by others, but by the truth of who she was and the care she gave and received. She felt a sense of gratitude for the journey, for the lessons learned, and for the presence of someone who had believed in her when the world had tried to break her in time. She understood that the mountain had given her more than a refuge. It had given her a chance to live fully, to trust deeply, and to love without fear. She had discovered that true strength was not loud or boastful, but quiet, consistent, and rooted in mutual respect. She had reclaimed her life and had found a partner who shared in her journey without conditions or demands. World below could continue its whispers, but she no longer carried their weight. She had learned to trust herself and the person who stood beside her. She had discovered that resilience, courage, and love could coexist, and that a life built on trust, care, and understanding could withstand any challenge. She had survived, and now she truly lived even after the town had tried to break her. She found strength she had never imagined. She had built a life on the mountain filled with trust, care, and quiet joy. The mountain man continued to stand by her side, offering support and understanding in ways that spoke louder than words. She had learned that presence and patience could be more powerful than any act of cruelty. She spent her days exploring new paths in hidden valleys. She found streams that sparkled in the sunlight and meadows where wildflowers grew freely. She climbed higher ridges and discovered places untouched by human eyes. The mountain became a teacher, showing her that life could be beautiful and that she had the courage to embrace it fully. Bond between them deepened as they faced small challenges together. They helped each other gather food and maintain the land and navigate paths that were sometimes difficult. She learned that strength was not just physical, but also emotional, and that facing challenges together made each step lighter. They shared laughter and quiet moments of reflection, and in these moments, their connection grew even stronger. She realized that she had begun to reclaim parts of herself that had been hidden away for years. She had learned patience, courage, and resilience, and had discovered that life could hold beauty even after hardship. She began to feel confident in her own decisions and no longer allowed fear or judgment to dictate her actions. She trusted herself, and the mountain man had shown her that trust could be safe. Town below continued its whispers, but they no longer had power over her. She walked with a quiet confidence, knowing that her worth was defined by herself and not by others. She had learned that true freedom came from living authentically, and that love and care were more powerful than judgment or cruelty. The mountain had given her space to grow, and the man had given her space to believe in herself. They spent long afternoons sitting by streams. Watching the water move around stones, she learned to enjoy silence and to find meaning in moments that did not require words. They shared small stories and quiet laughter, and discovered that joy could be found in simplicity. They learned that the power of connection lay in consistency, care, and understanding. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the years of struggle and judgment, and the slow transformation that had taken place. She realized that she had survived because she had never stopped believing in goodness, and that she had thrived because someone had chosen to stand quietly beside her. She understood that resilience was not just about surviving, but about living fully and embracing the life she deserved. The mountain man continued to offer steady support. He never demanded anything from her. He never judged or questioned her worth. He simply allowed her to be and to grow, and showed her that true strength was found in loyalty, care, and presence. She learned that love could be quiet and patient, and that it could transform a life over time. She began to see the mountain As a symbol of hope and renewal, the paths she had once feared became familiar, and she walked them with confidence. She explored new areas, finding hidden groves and secret streams, and learned to trust her instincts. She realized that freedom was both physical and emotional, and that she had earned the right to live without fear. Bond became a refuge against the whispers and judgment of the town. They shared small victories and simple moments, and found joy in each other's presence. They laughed quietly when animals appeared, or when the wind played through the trees. They discovered that life could be meaningful and beautiful without drama, and that true happiness came from trust, care, and shared understanding. She began to dream about the future with hope. She imagined a life where she could continue to grow and explore, and where judgment would not dictate her choices. She knew that she could face any challenge because she had learned to trust herself, and because she had someone who would always stand beside her. She understood that their connection could withstand any test, and that together they were stronger. The mountains showed her that resilience could be gentle, and strength could be patient. She learned that facing challenges did not require confrontation, but consistency, care, and courage. She had reclaimed her life and her spirit, and had discovered that the quiet bonds of trust and understanding could transform hardship into opportunity in moments of reflection. She thought about the girl who had walked through the town burdened by shame and fear. She realized how far she had come and how much she had grown. The mountain had offered refuge, and the man had offered loyalty and care. She had discovered that true freedom was found in trust, connection, and the courage to embrace life fully. They spent their days exploring and working together on the mountain, gathering what they needed and maintaining the paths. They shared small acts of care and responsibility, and discovered that life was richest when lived in connection with others. They laughed together and supported each other, and found joy in the simplicity and beauty of their surroundings. She realized that the town could continue its gossip, but it no longer affected her. She had discovered her own power and the importance of surrounding herself with people who valued her truth. She felt freedom that was deep and lasting, and knew that she could face whatever challenges came with courage and grace. The mountain and the man had given her not only safety, but also the ability to trust herself and live fully. The woman and the mountain man continued to explore and learn together. They discovered hidden valleys and untouched forests, and learned to navigate the land with care and confidence. They shared laughter and quiet reflection, and discovered that trust and patience could create a life rich with meaning and joy. She had reclaimed her life and learned that resilience and love could coexist. She walked through the mountain paths with peace and confidence. She had learned that her worth was not defined by others, and that true strength came from trust, care, and consistent presence. She felt gratitude for the journey, the lessons learned, and for the steady support that had allowed her to rediscover herself. She had survived and now truly lived with freedom, dignity, and hope.